Waypoints. Waypoints will cover all aspects of navigation for the overland traveler. Navigation is the act or practicing of navigating, the method of determining position, course, and distance traveled.
Navigation is the process or activity of accurately ascertaining one's position and planning and following a route. I think there's more than enough information about basic navigation on the trail, but I don't see many overlanders addressing navigation outside of that. For me, navigation is by far the subject I'm asked about most often. I'm asked about it often enough that it's the main impetus for my idea to create this podcast. I could never really answer the questions I receive properly in an email. The questions I get seem to focus on how do I put together my trips from A to Z? How do I come up with all the unique locations I go to? How do I create my routes? How do you find those lesser known trails all over the place? People want to know, how do I find the farmers markets in the middle of nowhere? How did you know about that restaurant, diner, or food truck? How did you discover that historical site? Well, each week we'll tackle step by step my methods for creating an incredible journey. First, do you know the 3 ways to navigate? There's celestial, orienteering, and global positioning system. Celestial navigation is the science of navigating by the stars, sun, moon, and planets. It's not something most of us know about or have the equipment for. But learning celestial navigation could be a lifesaver if your electronic toys stop working. Even without the proper equipment, you can still take the fundamentals and do some very basic orienteering. Orienteering is basically finding your way with only a map and compass. If you learn how to use a map and compass, you can pretty much navigate anywhere. You just use the map to give you a visual of the area, and the compass shows you the direction. GPS, it provides you with positioning, navigation, and timing on land or sea. GPS technology is in our cell phones, cars, and watches. It's also used for farming, construction, surveying, and lots of other stuff. The military, who this stuff was originally invented for, uses GPS for all types of applications, and it's also used for weather forecasting. Side note, I came up with the name Waypoint Overland based on the fundamental way that I put together my journeys. It all starts with that first waypoint, and I work off of that waypoint to create a route over land. This week, we'll be addressing my first steps in creating a route and an itinerary. The very first thing, as I said, is that very first waypoint. All throughout the year, I watch things like Art Wolfe's Travel to the Edge, Travel Channel, Long Way Round, Alaska Off-Road Warriors, and other programs like that. I research film locations of movies based on their cinematography and the locations they're filmed in. Movies like Road to Paloma, The Big Year, Into the Wild, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, Land Ho, Of River Runs Through It. I receive and read newsletters from the tourism departments of every state and for some cities and counties. And in addition to all of that, I always pay attention when someone tells me their stories of fun and adventure. I make sure to note the places and details on my phone or my notepad. I'm constantly updating a rolling list I have with all types of festivals and events all across the country. And I put all those locations and events on my Google map. I also add them to my Gaia GPS software, and I save all my GPX files to a hard drive. You acquire enough files over time that losing them is like losing a diary you've been writing in for years. For added redundancy, I keep it all written down on moleskin notepads too. Let's start an overland trip. Let's say I've decided I want to go to Overland Expo East, which is an event everybody should go to at least once if you're an overlander. It's like Disneyland or Disney World for overlanders. So Expo becomes my first waypoint. Then I look at the date I should arrive at that waypoint. Once I have this established, I then go to Google Maps and turn on the terrain feature to look at the terrain that lies between my starting point and my waypoint. In this case, the starting point is Washington. What I'm specifically looking for is the color green and bumps. I want as much of my route to travel through the green areas with the most bumps as possible. For me, Green means forest, national parks, BLM land, state and county forest, and hopefully trails and back roads. The bumps to me mean mountains, lakes, hilly land, marshes, and very often low population per square mile. That's conducive to being an area rich with wildlife. At this point, I loosely string together the events and locations to visit during my trip. I don't care where they are or how far out of the way they may be. The only criteria is them being between my starting point and furthest waypoint. These points for me most often are not in a direct path to my first waypoint because I try to travel by as many trails, dirt roads, and backcountry roads as possible. This is when I start to tighten things up and start creating potential routes. I use Guide GPS to look at campsites I've saved over the years to help guide me. And I just draw lines on a map at first. I look for actual roads and trails later. Now I have an idea of events, locations, and routes I might take. This is when I calculate how much time I would like to be at these places and add it all up with the general line of the start and finish date of my trip. Now it's time to compare possible routes with which one gives me the most green, the most bumps, top events, as well as locations and campsites. In addition to those considerations, I now start to consider actual day-to-day itineraries for each route. I want to get an idea of the rhythm for each route if I take it. Deciding on arrival and departure times is a big deal to me, so I need to include determining sunrise and sunset for each place, which changes as I go through different time zones. I like to arrive slightly before sunrise or right before sunset to most places for the photographic opportunities. This is when I use an app called Photo Ephemeris. I use it to help me plan all my outdoor photography during my trips. It's a map-based sun, moon, and Milky Way calculator. I'm able to plan a shot in great detail before ever going there. You don't want to miscalculate that bucket list shot on your once-in-a-lifetime journey. There are very different stories to be told by what choices I ultimately make. Next week, we'll choose our route and start filling in an itinerary. I'll explain how to have a detailed itinerary, yet not lose the ability to be spontaneous or go in a completely different direction due to circumstances out of your control. Also, how by securing campsites in advance, you can give yourself flexibility and options. Now let's move on to random waypoints.